Amazing Plea. A billionaire's son discovers an inspiring bond with a poor woman to save his dad. Ethan Caldwell slammed the car door, a burst of frustration coursing through him as he forced himself to step out into the crisp evening air. The sprawling estate loomed behind him, just as overwhelming as the weight of expectations from the father he could never please. He was the billionaire's son, yet all he felt was inadequacy, a feeling that tightened around his chest like a vice. All around him, people in the small Midwestern town carried the marks of hard work and sacrifice, their faces weathered yet alive, so different from the lifeless luxury surrounding him. It felt like a gilded prison. Walking toward his father's charity office, the familiar sense of dread returned. Every achievement could never match his father's expectations. Success meant profit, nothing more. But today was different. Though he delivered yet another package, something stirred within him, a silent yearning for genuine connections, not just hollow accolades. The streets were alive, the laughter in the diners and laughter echoing softly in the background mingled with his growing disquiet. As he entered the charity office, he nearly collided with a woman hustling to clear tables. Her laughter was infectious, filling the room with warmth and vibrancy. Lily, a waitress struggling to make ends meet and chasing her dream of becoming a nurse, seemed like a bright flame against the shadow looming over him. Their smiles crossed paths, and in that fleeting moment, Ethan felt a pull toward something different, something authentic. He could sense her unwavering determination, a stark contrast to the cold ambition that consumed his family. But underneath that glimmer of hope was a dangerous truth. He was trapped in a moral dilemma. Wealth or worth? The thought rattled inside his mind. There was a gaping chasm between their worlds, one filled with opportunities earned through privilege, the other, a relentless fight for survival. He wanted to reach out, to ask her about her dreams and her life, but the fear of his father's wrath stifled him. Losing himself in this friendship with someone deemed less than was terrifying, yet exhilarating. Before he could fully commit to this budding friendship, another storm brewed. The news about his father's health hit him like a punch to the gut. Critical illness, mounting medical costs, and whispers of public scrutiny. Every elite friend he'd known suddenly weighed in, their disdain for people like her tangible. "Why waste your time with someone beneath you?" echoed in his ears as he wrestled with their judgments. Torn, Ethan faced the hardest choice of his life: honor the family legacy or embrace the warmth of connections etched in shared struggles. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days passed, Ethan's phone sparked with a message from Lily, pushing him closer to the edge. Her life-changing decision stretched ominously on the screen before him. But it was the weight of the secrets that had begun to seep from his father's empire. The emails revealing a darker past, the founded wealth upon the backs of neglected communities, that robbed Ethan of his breath. Every hidden truth clawed at him, filling him with anguish, forcing him to confront the very principles he'd been raised to uphold. The internal chaos swelled. Could he rise above the legacy that chained him to the mansion and explore the bond that felt so right? Doubts spiraled like whirling dervishes, and just when he thought he'd make a choice, after so many uncertainties, word of his father's empire crumbling cast an even darker shadow. Was he meant to protect the family name at the cost of everything he admired in Lily? In this storm of uncertainty, Ethan stood paralyzed on the precipice of self-discovery, staring into an abyss filled with urgency and fear, with a text lingering painfully in the air. Would he reach for the ties of his family? Or the fragile link of hope he'd found in someone so real? Ethan stood frozen in the weighty silence of his luxurious office, the walls draped in the trappings of wealth. Yet, it felt unbearable. The polished mahogany desk gleamed under dim lighting, a stark contrast to the turmoil igniting within him. This room, where boardroom decisions had been made without a second thought, now felt like a cage. The realities of his father's empire, unraveling with each passing day, gripped him tightly. Images of Lily flickered in the corners of his mind, bright and hopeful, igniting a yearning for something real. His phone buzzed again, another reminder of the short, emphatic message from Lily. She needed to talk. The urgency in her words rattled within him, amplifying his anxiety. He glanced outside. The town life was vibrant, illuminating all that he admired yet dared not embrace. What if meeting her meant challenging every ideal he had grown up with? What if it meant walking away from the crushing legacy that came with wealth but no joy? Conflicted, Ethan grasped at the possibility of discovery. The layers of his identity felt like a jigsaw puzzle missing pieces. He had always been defined as the Caldwell heir, the son tasked with upholding his father's massive enterprise. But what if he peeled back that title? Who was Ethan Caldwell, stripped of the gilded expectations and harsh judgments? Pacing the room, he recalled moments with Lily, her laughter that lured him into the present, her spirit igniting dormant desires within his heart. He felt a magnetic pull towards her unyielding resolve, so different from the shallow aspirations that populated his social circles. Would confronting his father's business practices mean losing his inheritance? The thought sent an electric shiver down his spine. Every decision now felt monumental, not just for himself, but for a world filled with people who deserved better than what privilege offered. Caught in this turmoil, Ethan made his decision. He wrote a response to Lily, finally propelling himself towards vulnerability. "Let's meet. I need to know what you're thinking." Sending it felt like jumping into icy water, shocking, yet invigorating. It was an admission that he no longer wanted to live in the shadow of his family's expectations. As he drove to the diner where they agreed to meet, his heart raced with a blend of exhilaration and fear. The town felt different with each mile. The streets, once mundane, were now filled with possibilities awaiting his exploration. Confronting Lily would require honesty, which was as foreign to him as the thought of abandoning his family's legacy. Arriving at the diner, Ethan pushed through the door, the bell chiming a soft welcome. The aroma of food wafted around him, instantly comforting yet triggering a reminder of the life he was grappling with, one forged through comfort far removed from struggle. He spotted Lily by the window, her expression serene but thoughtful, kicking off the uneasiness that had tethered him. "Hi," he said, as she looked up with a warm smile that disarmed him. "I'm glad we could meet." "Me too," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot lately about choices." Choices. The word bore its weight, thickening the air between them. In that moment, Ethan felt the delicate balance of power shift within himself. He was no longer just the heir of his father's empire, but a man standing before someone whose hardships demanded respect. "There are things about my family you don't know," he said cautiously, the gravity of his admission palpable. "Things I need to know?" she probed, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. His breath hitched. This was his moment. Did he dare unveil the entangled truths of his lineage? Choices lay ahead not only for him, but for the family name he'd been raised to protect, now teetering between greed and compassion. And yet, as Ethan opened his mouth to share those secrets, the haunting question loomed over him. Would these revelations free him or bind him further? The diner felt like the precipice of change, but uncertainty clouded his vision. What would happen if the truth shattered both their worlds? Would she see value in him, or was he just another reflection of his father's flaws? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, pulling their attention toward the street, an ominous sign that change was imminent, and chaos was not far behind. What awaited them both beyond the window was trouble drawing closer, exposing the fragility of trust and the urgency of their choices. In that moment, Ethan realized he was standing at the edge of a defining chapter in his life. Little did he know, the repercussions of this choice would echo through every corner of his world. Ethan turned away from the window, shock still rippling through him. The noise outside had shattered the fragile moment shared with Lily, and now the weight of his thoughts pressed down on him more heavily than before. He felt urgent, like a dam about to burst, yet unsteady, not knowing how to let the floodgates open. "What was that?" Lily asked, her brows furrowed, shifting in her seat as a flicker of worry crossed her face. "Just some noise. I guess the town is restless," Ethan replied, masking the reality of his own internal chaos. "What were you going to say?" She prodded gently, her keen gaze piercing through the facade he tried to construct. Everything about this exchange felt pivotal, her question resonating within him like a bell tolling in a quiet church. It ignited his determination to confront the mess of his identity, even if every instinct warned against revealing too much. He allowed himself a moment, absorbing the comforting presence of Lily amidst rising tension. Despite everything, her smile still anchored him, an anchor he felt slipping. The world outside began boiling over with discontent as voices began to bark and rattle. It was now or never. "I was going to tell you," he began slowly, "that my father's business practices are—" His voice faltered as he glanced back toward the window. Outside, the confrontation was escalating. Shadows surged against the diner's aged glass, punctuating the quiet with palpable hostility. "They're not what everyone thinks. Is he corrupt?" Lily interjected, eyes widening with recognition of the potential implications. Ethan nodded, frustration boiling over. "Yes. I'm losing everything, Lily. This isn't just about me. It's about the people affected by my father's greed." He shot a glance at her, gauging her reaction. "I have the power to change things, to fight against it. But I'm terrified." "Terrified for your family?" she challenged, her gaze firm. "Or terrified of losing what you've known your whole life?" A sharp intake of breath was tugged from Ethan like a sharp blade cutting flesh. The reality of her question hung in the air, deeply challenging him. He had wrapped himself in the comforts of privilege for so long, never stopping to question the moral implications of his lineage until now. "I don't know who I am without the Caldwell name," he confessed, looking down at the table. The weight of expectation and entitlement pressed heavily on his chest. The facade of the empire he'd inherited felt more like chains each passing day. "But if I take action, if I fight, I'll be stripped of that label. I may even lose my entire family's legacy." "So what is stopping you?" she asked, her tone steady. "Do you value that more than your own integrity?" Her boldness inspired him. He thought of the struggles she faced, the strength she exhibited in her daily life. It stirred within him a burning need to confront not only his family's actions, but the flawed values that had always defined him. "You," he said finally, though he was unsure what he meant. "You force me to ask the right questions." "That's because you're capable of so much more than they ever told you," she pressed, leaning closer, igniting the flame of hope buried within him. Just then, the din of chaos outside crescendoed into a distant roar, drowning out any thoughts of the conversation they were having. Voices rose, and the tension outside permeated through their intimate space like smoke, foiling his newfound clarity. "I need to do something," Ethan said with renewed vigor, shaking off the hesitations that bound him. "While it's awful out there, I can't allow this chaos to dictate my life, or the truth I need to fight for. I have to confront my father. If I stand here watching it smolder, I'll lose everything, including you." He caught her eye, and for a moment, their eyes locked in silent agreement. They were standing together at the precipice, staring at a world on the brink of eruption. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed once more, and a figure stepped through, disrupting their fragile resolve. Each person's look indicated that safety was far from guaranteed. Something fierce and decisive flickered within Ethan, and he realized then that he no longer wished to hide in the shadows of his family's legacy. He sought light and purpose. But in that moment of clarity, a powerful realization slipped in. Standing up for what was right was no longer just an abstract ideal. It meant facing his father and everything that came with his family's tumultuous history. And now, that reckoning was looming closer than he could ever have imagined. The time had truly come to face the repercussions of his choices, and the consequences would test not only his conviction, but the depths of his relationship with Lily. Just before he could speak again, that cacophony from the outside swelled into a piercing scream. It was a clear signal that the storm had not only come, it was here. The tumult of his reality painted an urgent line across the present and threatened to plunge him into a conflict he could no longer avoid. Ethan straightened himself, pulse quickening, heart thundering. The decisions awaiting him shimmered like an illusion before his eyes. This was no longer just about him. More than ever, it was about standing resolutely with Lily and defending the values that truly mattered. "Brace yourself, Lily," he whispered, a fiery determination igniting within him as he took a decisive step toward the door. The path ahead promised conflict and uncertainty, demanding courage he was still finding within himself. But he could no longer wait. Change was coming, and it would either liberate him or plunge him further into chaos. How far would he go to protect those he cared for? As he reached for the door handle, he felt a single thought surge forth. This was only the beginning. The door creaked open, and the world outside crashed into Ethan like a wave. The tumult hung thick in the air, a chorus of shouts and anguished cries merging with the dark, threatening clouds overhead. This was not just a confrontation. This was a storm, a reckoning brewing as fiercely within him as it was in the chaos beyond. He hesitated, gripping the handle tightly, feeling the chill of metal seeping through him. In that moment, doubt clawed at him like a desperate creature. Would he truly face his father? Would he betray his family's legacy, the very foundation he had been raised upon? The fear of the unknown loomed large, but alongside that fear was a burgeoning sense of purpose. He had seen enough darkness, and now he wished to carry light into places steeped in shadows. Lily's presence, steadfast behind him, grounded him. "Ethan," she urged softly, almost as a reminder to himself. "This has to be done." Her voice sliced through the clamor, echoing with clarity. With a deep breath, he pushed the door wider and stepped outside into the fray. The scene was electric. People surged and ebbed like a restless tide, their voices a cacophony of anger and hope, demanding justice and transparency. It was a reflection of his inner turmoil, chaos mirroring chaos, yet something stirred within him. A relentless urge to act, to take a stand against everything he had known. As he traversed the streets, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him, but it was nothing compared to the heavy chains that had bound his conscience. Ethan's thoughts swirled. He was no longer just an heir to a fortune. He was a participant in a reality that begged for change, a reality that required not just wealth, but integrity, responsibility, and courage. His father's office loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the turmoil engulfing the town. It stood tall and imposing, once a symbol of power, now an epitome of everything that needed to be dismantled. Each step forward became an act of defiance against the inheritance he had been raised to uphold. What if he doesn't listen? The question slipped from his lips, vulnerable and raw. "He will listen if you speak your truth," Lily replied, her eyes an unyielding beacon. "Even if he doesn't agree, he can't ignore you. You have the right to be heard." The thought resonated, sculpting the uncertainty into a fledgling resolve. This wasn't merely about Ethan versus his father. It was about rewriting a narrative steeped in privilege to one grounded in accountability. He was not just fighting for himself. but for those silenced by a system he had unwittingly perpetuated. As they reached the entrance, he turned to Lily, searching her eyes for the affirmation he craved. "You're right. I need to embrace this." With a newfound determination, he pushed into the building, the world outside thinning into a distant echo. The lavish interior mocked him. Every opulent detail screamed of ill-gotten gains, every trophy recalling a past he wished to step away from. Yet, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the cold glamour surrounding him and the passionate warmth he had felt from the outside world. His father sat behind the polished mahogany desk, his expression a mask of shock and annoyance. "Ethan," he began, voice low and disapproving. "What is the meaning of this? You shouldn't be here right now." "Actually, I should," Ethan interjected, surprising even himself with the strength behind his words. "Because I can't stand idly by while you continue to exploit and manipulate people. I need you to listen to me. For once." His father's demeanor shifted momentarily, disbelief crackling in the air between them. Within that unsure gaze, Ethan saw the beginnings of a confrontation that had been brewing for years, a confrontation that promised to transform everything he knew. But would his father listen? As the tension thickened and the weight of generations pressed down, Ethan took another step forward. Change was as chaotic as the world outside, but somehow it also felt liberating. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and one push could change everything. Would he be brave enough to challenge the patriarch and rewrite his family's legacy? Ethan's words hung in the air, a charged challenge that pulsed between father and son. For a flickering moment, uncertainty flared in his father's eyes, a thin veil over the confidence that had usually held court in this room. That mask, once so immovable, now seemed imperfectly frayed. Yet, with a sudden clarity, Ethan recognized that mere words alone would not spark the change he envisioned. "Are you listening or just hearing me?" he pressed, willing his voice to be steadier than the adrenaline coursing through him. The question was a mirror, reflecting not just their familial ties, but an entire legacy of silence and complicity woven into the fabric of their lives. His father shifted, claws of defiance emerging. "You don't understand how this world operates, Ethan. You think your idealism will save anyone? This isn't a fairy tale, it's business. Strong decisions require sacrifices. They always have. But the weight of those sacrifices, the unseen scars upon those whose lives were shaped by such decisions, flared in Ethan's mind, igniting a deeper resolve. And what about those sacrifices? Lives ruined, communities shattered, all for the sake of profit. I refused to accept this path as the only way. Silence enveloped them, almost palpable. Ethan watched as the war within his father's expression began cracking the surface of a hardened belief system. The flickers of understanding were both terrifying and invigorating, a sliver of light illuminating the shadows cast by years of paternal conflict. "You have a responsibility, too," Ethan countered, pushing the advantage he sensed. "To be a leader, to inspire progress instead of perpetuating greed. Imagine what could happen if we redirected our resources, helped those in need instead of lining our pockets." Ethan's words morphed from a plea into a manifesto, thrusting forward with surprising clarity. His father recoiled slightly, the initial shock transforming into suspicion. Bad ideas can drive a man to madness. What makes you think you can change the system? This was no longer merely a father-son standoff. It was a symptom of a generational curse, one he was determined to shatter. "Because I'm willing to try. Because I want to be better than what this family has stood for. And because I believe you can be better too." A muscle twitched in his father's jaw, the tension palpable, and for a moment, the omnipotent titan felt diminished. Was this a man in crisis, teetering on a precipice as much as Ethan? Or was it simply the rage of an entrenched patriarch unwilling to bend? "Enough of this." His father's voice returned like a dark storm, sealing off the thoughts that dared to bubble. "You think this will end without ramifications? You'll hurt those you care for by challenging me like this." Each word struck like a blow, but rather than shatter his resolve, they crystallized it. "No. I will hurt them more by remaining silent, by continuing to allow your legacy of avarice to dictate our lives. We can change this. We must change this. If you throw me out, it won't be the end. I'll find a way. I will shatter this cycle on my own." A storm ignited in his father's gaze, rage battling against flickering doubt. Ethan felt the swell of courage, both thrilling and daunting. He could feel the change swelling around him, a moment that held infinite potential. But as he stood defiant, adrenaline coursing, he couldn't shake the question lingering in the corners of his mind. In pushing the boundaries of his father's empire, what personal sacrifices might he need to make? What allies would become enemies? As the silence stretched out like an elastic band ready to snap, the stakes heightened, and Ethan braced himself for the confrontation to come. What consequences awaited as he stepped deeper into this conflict? Would he lose more than he stood to gain? The weight of those possibilities threatened to choke him, but Ethan pressed on, determined to break his family's shackles forever, and perhaps in the process, uncover a truth about himself he had yet to fully grasp. The next words he would utter could change everything, a declaration that might ignite both liberation and despair. Ethan took a deep breath, ready to unleash the next phase of his transformation as the clouds swirled ominously outside, reflecting the tempest within. Would this final confrontation lead him to the light, or further into darkness? Ethan's heart raced as the stillness threatened to suffocate him. The clock on the wall ticked sharply, each sound echoing in the cavernous silence of the room. He could sense the shift in the air, the tension crystallizing into something tangible. With a sudden surge of decision, he knew he had to pivot his approach. Perhaps pushing harder wasn't the way forward. He had to weave in understanding with his challenge, finding a thread of connection. "Dad," he began, softening his tone. "I don't want to diminish your experience. You've built something impressive. Everyone in this city knows your name. But I wonder, at what cost? What if there's a way to keep the legacy but reshape it for a better purpose?" His father's eyes narrowed, suspicion still lurking in their depths. The mask of authority faltered, and then settled back into place, a tangible barrier between them. "You overestimate your understanding of this world. It's cutthroat. You have to fight dirty to survive. You want compassion? You want to help people? It doesn't work like that at our level." Ethan's mind churned with frustration and introspection. His father's rigid stance seemed a mausoleum of past decisions cloaked in bravado. The reluctance to consider another path felt like a shackle, and Ethan was gripped by the need to break free, both for his father and himself. "But it could, Dad." The words slipped out with an urgency that surprised him. "What if we could create a business model that actually supports people? What if profit and compassion weren't opposing forces?" A flicker of something passed over his father's features. Was that curiosity? The realization unsettled Ethan. Perhaps the very challenge he had unleashed was a mirror, not just towards his father, but also towards his own fears. Was he equipped to lead such an endeavor? Could he convince those around him to shift their mindset? "No one will follow a weak leader," his father shot back, the thunder of his authority echoing. Yet, behind the hostility, Ethan sensed an opportunity to redefine the very essence of strength. "Strength doesn't mean leaving others behind," Ethan replied, feeling a sense of clarity. "It means using your power to uplift those who don't have it. You taught me that a leader stands tall by the people he carries with him, not just over them. But you have to believe that change is possible." For the first time, Ethan watched as his father's posture faltered slightly, uncertainty peeping through the cracks. It wasn't the admission of defeat Ethan sought, but rather a chink in the armor that cloaked years of staunch beliefs. And yet, that breakthrough beckoned a darker thought. What if this pivot bared more than their family legacy? What if the weight of their past demanded sacrifices that neither was prepared to face? Ethan glanced toward the window, the storm outside echoing his inner turmoil. With each passing moment, the stakes soared. He realized that what lay on the line was not only his vision for the future, but also a relationship with the man he had idolized. A relationship that might never emerge unscathed. "Think about it, Dad," Ethan pressed with a deep breath, his resolve solidifying. "What if together we could redefine business in our image? It would take risks, pushing back against everything we've known. But isn't that what transformational leaders do? Challenge the status quo? What if I'm meant to lead that change, even if it means stepping away from this empire?" The challenge hung in the air, thick with implications. Ethan was poised at the edge of a radical transformation, one that would ripple through his life and his father's. The look in his father's eyes shifted again, conflict brewing between pride and doubt. In that moment, Ethan realized he was on the cusp of a crucial decision. It was now or never. He needed to either forge ahead bravely or retreat into comfortable shadows. He could almost hear the clash of destinies colliding, a war not just for change, but for a deeper understanding of themselves. As the shadows deepened, Ethan braced himself. Whatever response came next would set them both down a path fraught with revelations and challenges. Would his father take a step into the unknown, or would Ethan be left to navigate this journey alone? The answer would shape not just their futures, but the legacy of their family and what it meant to truly lead. The silence draped over them, a tangible weight pressing against Ethan's chest. He could almost hear the ticking clock, each second mocking his uncertainty. His father's hardened expression was more than a mask. It was a defense, a lifetime of hard-earned wisdom condensed into a rigid facade. Ethan felt the pulse of his ambition racing beneath the surface. He had voiced his resistance, confronted the authority that had loomed so large in his life, yet remnants of self-doubt clung to the edges of his resolve. Did he truly possess the strength to lead this transformation? A small voice in the back of his mind questioned if his father's wisdom could truly be reconciled with his ideals. "Ethan," his father finally spoke, the edge in his voice cutting through the stagnant air. "You're speaking of a fantasy. Businesses are built on cold, hard facts and profits. Idealism doesn't register on the balance sheet. If we start thinking with our hearts, then we risk losing everything." The words hung there, a persistent echo. A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. Not from fear, but from a sudden clarity. Perhaps the emotional stakes were indeed intertwined with the fiscal ones. What if this idealism could become not just a moral compass, but a cornerstone of business strategy? "Let's look at this logically, then." Ethan dove deeper into the conversation, feeling conviction surge within him. What if our financial strength came from fostering a community that believes in us? What if, by prioritizing social responsibility, we built loyalty that translated into profit? There's a market for businesses that do good, Dad. Consumers today, especially the younger generation, want to invest in something greater than just the product. His father's brow furrowed, the gears of his mind visibly struggling against the new paradigms Ethan presented. The prospect of weakening the core beliefs that had brought them success seemed terrifying. But within the storm of doubt flickered another emotion: curiosity. Ethan seized the moment, leaning into it. Imagine a partnership with local organizations, not just projects, but alliances that uplift the community. What we offer can be transformative, creating jobs, boosting local economies. It's a shift to viewing our business as an ecosystem, not just an entity. He watched as his father wrestled internally, eyes darting to the window, where rain began to patter softly against the glass. Outside, the storm mirrored their tension, a clash against the conventional that begged to be interrupted. "But doing that would change everything," his father muttered, the echoes of his own fears spilling forth. "What if it fails? What if people don't respond? We've invested too much, Ethan. We can't afford to gamble with our legacy." The weight of the legacy was more than just tradition. It was a crown he'd worn but now felt heavy, filled with a history Ethan craved to reshape. It was a crossroads of risk and opportunity, and layered beneath each fear was the glimmer of ambition they both harbored. "Dad, what if we don't do anything?" Ethan pressed, a visceral urgency underpinning his words. "What if we maintain the status quo and watch everything crumble under pressures we can't foresee? Inaction is its own risk. The world is changing, and companies that refuse to evolve fade away." Time stretched, and for a brief moment, Ethan caught a glimpse of his father's vulnerability, perhaps even his own. The refusal to adapt could lead to their demise, something that threatened their family's very existence. Their eyes met, a moment of unspoken understanding cementing between them. It wasn't just about the business. It was about the future they could build beyond the confines of fear and tradition. Ethan felt a surge of hope, an opportunity not simply for change, but for a deepening relationship. "I believe we can do this, Dad," he said, his voice steady but laced with the gravity of what lay ahead. "Let's not just preserve what's been built, but enrich it. Together we can pioneer a new vision." The storm outside seemed to let up for a moment, the air tinged with both tension and possibility. But as they stood at the precipice of this new adventure, Ethan could sense that their path forward was fraught with decisions that would challenge everything they held dear. Would they seize this moment to redefine their legacy, or would fear tether them to the past? The answer rested as heavily in the air as the lingering rain, each drop a reminder that time was slipping away. As Ethan awaited his father's response, a lingering thought gnawed at him. What if the changes they pursued unearthed secrets buried deep in their family's history? Secrets that could threaten to redefine their understanding of legacy altogether. Ethan held his breath as the silence thickened once more, both men caught in a web of unspoken words and shifting perspectives. His father's gaze darted back to the window, where the last raindrops shimmered like fading possibilities. This moment teetered on the edge of evolution for both of them, the tension gnawing at Ethan's resolve, but fueling his determination. What if it does fail? His father's voice was hesitant, layered with concern that had spanned decades. "You could destroy everything we've worked for." A familiar weight settled on Ethan's shoulders. The legacy was a vast structure, meticulously constructed over years, intricate in its design with little room for error. But in that monumental presence lurked an equally formidable fear: stagnation. He couldn't shake the sensation that they'd be capitulating to the very thing that had the potential to crush them: apathy wrapped in caution. "Failing doesn't equate to destruction, Dad. Failure is part of progress," Ethan replied. Each word carried an urgency that felt charged with latent energy, a call for both him and his father to confront their fears. "We could learn from it, reassess, adapt. The real danger lies in doing nothing, in letting our apprehensions dictate our choices." Frustration flared momentarily within him. It was so much easier to cast their future against the familiar parameters of safety and tradition, rather than to embrace growth, which inevitably came with risks. His mind raced through the scenarios they could construct together. Wouldn't this be a legacy their family could be proud of? "What I'm proposing isn't a fantasy, it's an evolution. If we want to thrive in the current climate, this is our chance to future-proof our business," Ethan pressed, drawing on an instinctual understanding of the marketplace. He had studied the trends and observed a growing hunger for corporate accountability in consumers, especially those who sought connection over mere transactions. "Please look beyond the immediate numbers. This isn't just altruism, it's re-engineering our model." His father finally turned to him, eyes widening in acknowledgement. Ethan noted the begrudging recognition of the substantive argument layered within the idealism. It felt like a crack had formed in his father's stoic veneer, allowing room for inquiry. "You really believe this is the way forward?" His father's voice softened slightly, revealing vulnerability amid the doubt. "I do." Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline, an exhilarating clash of hope and anxiety. "But we must act deliberately and transparently. letting it be known that we are committed, not just for the sake of profit, but for genuine impact. This commitment resonated within him. He was not just seeking transformation for the business, but also grappling with an image of himself that became clearer with every passing moment. The price of authenticity was clarity, and he had to seize that guiding principle to carve his own path. While he could see hesitation lingering in his father's eyes, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. What would happen if they dared to venture into uncharted territories? The prospect also meant redefining their carefully constructed familial bond. A part of Ethan was terrified. Would this push his father away or strengthen their connection? As blood ran thicker than water, what if their legacy turned into a battleground, exposing deep-seated grievances sheltered beneath decades of tradition? What if, his father started, then seemed to restrain himself. What if this leads us to discover something about our family we weren't ready to face? The question hung in the air, raw and potent. Ethan's heart raced at the implications of those words. What secrets lay hidden beneath layers of inherited expectations and unexamined truths? Then let's face it together, Ethan urged, the fire in his chest burning brighter with the intensity of this precarious moment. Whatever comes next, we can deal with it. But first, we must confront this present, our risk of stagnation, head-on. Now it was their turn to decide. The path ahead loomed in the distance, shrouded in uncertainty. Yet with every heartbeat echoing with potential, the question still lurked. Would this journey unravel the very fabric of their legacy, or weave a stronger bond through the trials they faced? As they stood at this volatile intersection of hope and fear, both men realized the stakes were higher than imagined. Would they turn back, or take that defining step into a new era of their family history? Ethan felt the pulse of anticipation mingling with dread, and he knew they were about to embark on an exploration that could forever alter their course. It was time. The next moment shifted fully into focus, a confrontation they had both resisted but desperately needed. His father's hesitant nod would be the signal, but what lay ahead was a precipice that might not just change the business. They could unearth unspoken truths about themselves, their family, and the very meaning of legacy itself. The moment his father nodded, a seismic wave of emotions crashed over Ethan. It was a subtle gesture, but laden with implications: acceptance, hesitation, and a tentative alliance. They stood, two figures at the edge of a precipice, staring into the vast uncertainty of their choices. The room seemed to close in, charged with uncharted possibilities that only heightened his resolve. Ethan inhaled deeply, channeling the resolve that had brewed during their conversation. It was time to forge a plan, one anchored not just in financial survival, but in a vision that could redefine what their family represented. He envisioned boardroom conversations dominated by discussions of integrity and social responsibility instead of mere profit margins. Wouldn't that legacy resonate far beyond the confines of their corporate identity? "Let's map this out," he exclaimed, his voice cutting through the thick ambiance like a sudden gust of wind. "If we're going to do this, we need a full strategy, clear, actionable, and transparent. We can't operate on half measures." His father's demeanor shifted subtly, eyes narrowing, brows furrowing deeper, as if weighing the prospects laid before him. "You're talking about a fundamental shift. This isn't just about numbers, it's about people." Exactly. The reality of consumers seeking a connection weighed heavily on Ethan's mind. They craved authenticity and could smell insincerity from a mile away. "Yes, it's about people," he affirmed. "People want to align with values. They want to believe in what we stand for. And they will support us not just with dollars, but with loyalty." His father remained silent, processing this. Ethan understood the layers of fear obscuring the abyss of change they were staring into. His own insecurities echoed deep within him, uncertain if he was prepared for the transformative journey. Would they win over clients, or would they face resistance? "Risk is part of growth," he said softly, wading into still waters of thought. What were the rumors you used to share about playing safe? Safety is the new failure. Well, aren't we putting ourselves on a path dangerously close to that? His father's eyes met his, revealing flickers of curiosity and resistance in equal measure. Ethan's heart thrummed in his chest. This was a crucial juncture, not just for their business, but for them as a family. Let's start with our current projects, Ethan proposed, his voice steady. We can identify pain points, areas needing transformation. Perhaps we could pilot a project that embraces social responsibility, allocating a percentage of profits to address community issues directly related to our product line. We install accountability while fostering relatability. His father's brow furrowed further, grappling with the implications of Ethan's suggestion. What if it falters? This could put us on the freeway to bureaucracy, to being labeled as trendy rather than genuine. Then we adapt. Again, Ethan retorted, the passion surging within him. Failure was not an endpoint. It was a loop of perpetual growth. If we lead with integrity and transparency, staying authentic in our communications, we can pivot as needed. Isn't that the nature of any living entity? To adjust until it finds its true north? Ethan could see the hesitation shifting, the tight lines on his father's face beginning to soften. But there was still an underlying thread of fear that made his stomach clench. The prospect of vulnerability was at its peak. They were embarking on unfamiliar territory that demanded relentless commitment. But what else lurks beneath the surface? His father finally murmured, echoing their earlier conversation. The waves of truth hovered heavily over them, tauntingly close yet elusive. In an instant, Ethan realized this wasn't merely about business or legacy. It was about themselves. Whatever it is, we face it, he declared, an unwavering edge sharpening his voice. We owe it to ourselves to embrace this journey, not just as a father and son team, but as partners in every sense. His father's chin lifted slightly, the flicker of a spark igniting in his eyes. Perhaps the real challenge wasn't just about what they could accomplish in the boardroom, but how they could evolve, both personally and professionally. As they began to sketch their strategy on a weathered notepad, Ethan felt the tightrope they walked. Would this path reveal the unspoken fractures in their relationship, or mend the seams that had grown frayed over years? Each mark they made symbolized a tentative step forward, closer to an ambiguous yet undetermined future. With every stroke of the pen, Ethan sensed the synergy building, a growing bond layered with the potential for conflict and resolution entwined tightly together. Yet, even as excitement flared within him, a faint sense of dread lingered. Entering this territory meant casting aside more than just old methodologies. It meant facing hard questions about their family's history, perhaps even exposing flaws they had long avoided. The unfolding journey echoed the rhythm of his heart. Would they unravel the complexities that lay hidden beneath decades of tradition, or strengthen what it meant to be a family, united in purpose? As he drafted their vision, the air crackled with promise, yet felt heavy with uncertainty. Would the depths of discovery enrich their legacy, or plunge them into chaotic revelations they weren't prepared to confront? The line between evolution and dissolution blurred as they delved deeper into an uncharted future, and Ethan steeled himself for whatever truths lay ahead. Ethan Caldwell had crossed boundaries he once deemed insurmountable. The once insipid shadows of his family's legacy had invigorated his appetite for change. Today, standing at the precipice of a new dawn, nestled between ambition and uncertainty, he felt the air thrum with potential. Every heartbeat urged him to infuse truth into the very fabric of the family name that had haunted him for so long. With his father's tentative acceptance, they had embarked on the transformative journey, one that could recalibrate not just their business, but the essence of their familial relationship. Together, they had drafted a roadmap for a company anchored in integrity and accountability. As hope surged, doubt and fear lingered in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. Weeks passed as they meticulously reshaped their vision. Responsible investments in the community, transparency in business practices, and prioritizing ethical treatment of employees. The transition was not without opposition. The board remained skeptical, cloaked in age-old habits and dismissive of idealism. Yet as they presented their plan, a tangible shift began. Investors who once gravitated toward profit margins now leaned toward purpose. The tide of public opinion swelled, lending them an unexpected boost. Each small victory transformed suspicion into cautious optimism. Ethan's confidence grew steadily, illuminating pathways he never knew existed. During a public presentation, he stood before a crowd that whispered of a newfound legacy. A legacy crafted not from avarice, but from a desire to uplift others. As he spoke passionately about the resonance of social responsibility, he looked to his father, who watched with an intensity that spoke volumes. This was not merely business, it was redemption, a battle against the decay of conscience inherited. Together, we create a heartbeat, Ethan emphasized, his voice ringing clear. Our future relies on the relationships we build and the trust we foster within our communities. This is not just an initiative, it's our new foundation. The reception that followed bristled with enthusiasm. The audience, a melange of business leaders, citizens, and even critics, had begun to resonate with the ethos Ethan championed. The company flourished, with profits aligning with the values it now embraced. Recognition flowed in from prestigious organizations that celebrated their commitment to innovation and compassion. Slowly, the rungs of the corporate ladder lost its cold metallic grip. Ethan's interaction with board members shifted. They were now willing to embrace dialogue rather than dominance. His father, once an immovable force, began seeking Ethan's perspective, including him in strategies and discussions, acknowledging his insights and acknowledging the potential for togetherness they had forged. But personal growth came with its challenges. Ethan now grappled with braving the skeletons lurking in his family's closet. Eager to propel the new vision forward, he faced uncomfortable truths, revealing the intricate web of compromises his father had woven in pursuit of power. Yet in confronting his family's history, the father-son dynamic also transformed. Walls fell, leading to late-night conversations rich with vulnerability, the kind that brought healing. As the months turned to seasons, something within Ethan had reshaped. He no longer felt like a reluctant heir, but a resilient leader. The philanthropic ventures sprouted consequences, establishing genuine connections in the very community he had once distanced himself from. A palpable buzz thrummed across town. Ethan Caldwell, the heir to a Titan brand, was now a beacon of hope. The final turning point materialized at a charity gala hosted by their company. With a bustling crowd, Ethan took the stage once again, this time not just to present numbers, but to share their journey. Our legacy is not defined by what we own, but by how we uplift those around us, he declared, gripping the mic tightly. Applause surged, a feedback loop of appreciation that echoed in his heart. In that moment, looking out over a sea of smiling faces, those who uplifted them when they struggled and rallied around their mission, Ethan felt victorious. He proved to himself that the most demanding shifts could unveil monumental transformations, replacing inherited ideologies with a sense of purpose intertwined with compassion. As the night wound down, his father approached him, emotion welling up in his seasoned eyes. "You've not just reshaped this company, son. You've changed me. I've come to see the complexities in our choices, and that true legacy is built on understanding." Ethan smiled, a feeling of warmth washing over him. He had achieved a connection deeper than any corporate edifice, one forged in truth, forgiveness, and a newfound respect that would underpin their relationship going forward. This was his personal victory, a legacy now governed by heart rather than simply wealth. It was finally time to redefine everything that once held him captive, to emerge from the shadows of his father's empire forged by his own resolve. Ethan Caldwell had evolved from the gilded prison of wealth into a trailblazer, focused and fulfilled, each step reverberating with the echoes of genuine connections. His commitment echoed loudly in the hearts he had touched across communities, proving that true achievement transcended mere earnings. The road ahead shimmered with possibility. He had not just transformed a company, but had discovered a purpose that filled his spirit. Together with his father, he stepped into a future they could both embrace, ready to navigate the uncharted waters ahead. Afraid, yes, but emboldened by authenticity. Now more than ever, Ethan understood the power of legacy. It was never too late to take the plunge, to rewrite the narrative that bound a family. And he had done exactly that. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment with your reactions and theories about this profound transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. You need to spread the word and show your support.